What's up, you guys? We're talking UFC London. Major implications for the future of the welterweight division. I want to comb through them with you guys real quick. We have the #1 ranked Leon Edwards, who recently lost his throne in this division. He's taken on the #5 ranked Sean Brady. And while we're talking about rankings, can you guys please give me your opinion on this? This is a genuine question. Do you guys like the way the UFC labels the #2 fighter in the division, right? And #2, I mean, take that for what you will, because Jack Della Maddalena is the next fighter fighting for the belt. But Leon Edwards is essentially the #2 ranked fighter, but he's ranked #1, right? You got the champion, who really is the #1 kingpin of the division, and then they go to #1 there as the next in the rankings. I don't like that. I think it should go #1 C, then go to #2. All right, give me your guys' thoughts on that. I understand they're trying to say it's the #1 contender. I don't really like that. All right, give me your opinion there. But over to the importance of this fight. You take a look at what's going on at the top. And although this is a huge opportunity for both fighters, and you could argue that they could potentially be next to fight for the belt with a big win here, it's not guaranteed, okay? Because you have Shavkat Rakhmonov waiting in the shadows. A lot of people would probably say that he's the next to be deserving of fighting for the belt. He already was supposed to be fighting Belal Muhammad until Belal pulled out of that fight there, and then a couple things move around, and now Jack Della Maddalena is the fighter who gets that next opportunity. Okay, but you have to understand that Shavkat is right in the mix. The winner of this fight obviously will be right there with him. And then you have Joaquin Buckley, who's on a 6-fight winning streak since dropping down to this weight class. He's another fighter that you could kind of throw into the mix of this three-headed monster. With the winner of this main event, Shavkat, and himself, the UFC has some solid playing cards to move around here. It's going to be very interesting to see how they throw those cards down on the table. You also want to note Carlos Pratis and Michael Morales both have huge fights coming up, with Michael Morales taking on Gilbert Burns on May 10th and Carlos Pratis taking on Jeff Neal April 12th down in the 305. I would like to see both of those fighters get wins and then have them face off with each other. I mean, they're stellar fighters, but they're still young in their careers. So let them string off some more victories before they're really in the mix here. But I will say this. I think that the winner of Edwards and Brady will be a step ahead of Buckley. Shavkat, maybe he's ahead of them, but just how is everything going to unravel? And obviously, we have to see Belal Muhammad versus Jack Della Maddalena take place before we could even start really understanding how it's all going to play out. We may see an immediate rematch. I mean, that's not super likely because Belal Muhammad's not a fighter that's defending his belt for a long period of time, but you never know. It could be a controversial type of fight. It could be an exhilarating fight. I mean, that's not typically the case with Belal Muhammad, but that is the case when Jack steps in there. So a lot of interesting things going on. I won't hold you guys up anymore. I know you guys want me to jump into this first fight. I got to say this real quick, guys. If anyone out there is a video editor, okay, if you guys are really polished up with streaming and video editing software and stuff like that, if you guys are interested in helping me out, or you potentially want to put some money in your pocket, please reach out to me. I got my social media below me. I got my email there as well. Shoot me a message. I would like to ask you some questions there. If anyone's interested in working with me for this card, if you guys have been keeping up with the work that we've been putting in, specifically with that UFC 313 card, man, that was crazy. Hit him with the clean sweep, capped it off with the Magomed and Pullyaev 5-unit play. We had a huge 2-team 7-unit play that cashed. There was all types of targets that were thrown out that we caught at great odds, man. We had a massive, I think we had 23 units out on that card. We profited in a crazy way. So if you guys are looking to work with me, of course, just reach out to me. I'll give you further details there. If you guys all can, please smash this like button, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and I'll dive into it a little more as we get to the main event. But as I've kind of briefly previewed in a couple other videos, I've been in the talks with Sean Brady's team about potentially getting some work in with Brady and Joe Pyfer, getting some mixed content coming your guys' way together. So hopefully that's something that comes to fruition down the line. But I have got some insight. I know Brady is super motivated for this fight, man. This is going to be a good one for him. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get to that spot. So many big things coming up on the horizon. I would love for you guys to be part of my journey towards being one of the top MMA creators out here in our world. So cannot wait to show you guys what's coming up down the line, man. Let's jump into the first fight.
The teller.
Here we go. Guram Kutateladze takes on Fernandes at 155. This isn't the first time that Guram has been matched up with a lesser known Brazilian fighter who fights out of a powerhouse gym from Brazil. Of course, when you think about the Elvis Brenner fight, now I know Elvis Brenner has since really carved the name out for himself, but at the time he was massively overlooked and people didn't really put too much respect on his name. Now, I'm not sure if that's going to be the same case for Kauê Fernandes, who fights at a Team Nova União. Brenner fought at a shoot box, or does fight at a shoot box. Kauê Fernandes shows some solid striking abilities, but Guram, this is a dude that really can grapple, man. If you're not up to par there, he will break you down. He will control you. You take a look at the level of competition that he's had since joining the UFC, kicked things off with a split decision victory over Mateusz Gamrot. And then he went on a 2-fight losing skid. But take a look at those fights. Went to a split against Damir Ismagulov. Some people had him winning that fight. Took the L against Elvis Brenner. We were just talking about that fight. He was in control of that fight up until the point that he wasn't. I mean, that was just a crazy one, man. He broke down. He got landed on in a huge way. And he did get finished. But I'll tell you what, I don't hold him under the magnifying glass, as I like to say, too much for that loss. Somewhat of a learning experience, even though I know he's up there in age. You got to like the way that he bounced back with that last victory over Jordan Vucenic, which he did go through some slight adversity. At the end of the day, he takes that fight over. He did go to the grappling. You take a look at the numbers. The control time was about the same, but in pivotal points towards the end of that fight, it was the grappling that really helped Guram get his hand raised. And he went through adversity early on in that fight. He was bloodied up. He was hurt. And I think that Jordan Vucenic, who we will be talking about a little bit later on, is a higher level fighter than, at least from what I've seen from Kauê Fernandes thus far. And the major red flag is when you take a look at Kauê Fernandes' bout with Marc Diakiese, that was a fight that he was controlled for 8 minutes and 38 seconds. We know Diakiese can do that to some lower level fighters, but I think that Guram's a higher level wrestler, and I think that that's the easy path to victory for Guram here, and that's what's in his back pocket. Now, as far as the striking goes, even though a lot of us look at Guram like he's just a straight grappler, it's not necessarily the case. He can throw down with you there. He's very flexible. You take a look at his IG, man. This dude will pull his leg completely over his head. I mean, he has some kicks and whatnot. He can hang with Kauê there, but I want to see him changing levels. And if you want to play devil's advocate, Kauê still hasn't even turned 30, surrounds himself with good people over at Nova União. Maybe we see a big leap up in his abilities, but we just haven't seen anything from him thus far to really argue that he should win this fight. You know, the Muhammad Yahya fight, Muhammad Yahya, if you guys don't know how I feel about him, I think he's not even a UFC caliber fighter. I think that he was kind of granted an opportunity to fight in the octagon based off certain situations with the UFC doing events over in Saudi Arabia and whatnot. I just don't think that he's on that level. So I don't put too much merit into that victory. I don't really put a lot of merit into any of the victories on his resume. So yeah, I'm taking Guram to win this fight. I think Guram should be able to drown him with the grappling. Maybe the question that we should be having here is, does he find a finish in this spot? And that's an interesting conversation because Kauê's still never been finished. Obviously, he's still never been subbed. And also, Guram only has one submission victory down there. Can he open up with some ground and pound and potentially get Kauê out of there? Kauê's shown to be decently durable, but this is that step up that I talked about. So all in all, I'm going to say that Guram wins a decision. I'm going to say that he doesn't get Kauê out of there. Kauê's still young, seems to be durable, but I do have Guram winning this fight pretty convincingly. We take a look at some of the opening lines for this fight, and we're looking at Guram being a 4-1 favorite. He's currently right around a -400, and I think that that line is pretty damn accurate. If you're looking to go lock this in, this will give me a chance to shout out my partners at BetUS. If anyone's looking to sign up to a new sports book, I mean, they'll give you the best deposit matches that you're going to find in the game. Okay, guys, so I do highly recommend BetUS. I use them myself, and if anyone's looking to sign up, let me know if you do. I'll give you an additional gift. And at -400, which the line probably will creep up towards like a -550, I think that we will see action continue to come in on him. So you might want to get on it early. Could be a parlay piece. Maybe we're throwing this up in that massive long shot parlay that we'll be doing in the prop edition video. This could be a fight that we talk about more in the prop edition, but I would lean away from Guram finding the finish. Okay, but it is a pretty safe parlay piece if you get in on it early enough. We'll stay put in the lightweight division where we have Jai Herbert, who will have the hometown edge here as he represents England. He'll be taking on Chris Padilla, a fighter that has recently burst onto the scene. And you take a look at his 2 victories. He's 2-0 since joining the UFC. They've aged pretty well. But first, let's talk about Jai here for a second. He has solid striking abilities, specifically with his boxing. He's been in there with some big names before. A lot of you guys, or some of you guys, actually had the nerve to say that he was en route to defeating my boy Ilia Topuria. And that fight did take place at 155. And go rerun the tape, and you'll see that Ilia Topuria was just waiting to set up his knockout. And the knockout that he landed was one of the most devastating KOs that we've ever seen in the octagon. He got Jai out of there in the second round. But if you want to talk about giving Jai some credit, I'll understand what you're saying. I've always put respect on Jai's name, okay? Ever since he's been fighting over in Cage Warriors, he was the champ back there. I thought that he was a solid prospect coming into the UFC from back then. So you don't have to convince me of that. I love the offensive ability that he has, but I do question him defensively. All right, we've seen him in some firefights before where he's been KO'd. Of course, the Francisco Trinaldo fight, man, that was a crazy one. That was his UFC debut, in fact, and they went to war, and eventually Trinaldo caught him in the third. We already talked about the Ilia Topuria KO loss. Renato Moicano was able to exploit him down on the mat quite a bit, but we know Renato is high level there. I do have some question marks about him defensively. Padilla is showing to be pretty sharp in his own right offensively. I mean, you take a look at that elbow that he just landed on Rong Zhu. That was nasty. Hit him with that step-in elbow, stopped the fight with it essentially, right? Closed the eye up of Rong Zhu, and Rong Zhu is looking pretty sharp, man. He had a great bounce-back performance, so that fight aged very well for Padilla. The James Jean top submission, it almost looked like James threw the fight. It was so ridiculous the way that he just flopped down to the mat and got his back taken. But, you know, in retrospect, James is showing to be a respectable fighter, right? And even his loss that he had against Rufi has aged very well, all right? So when you kind of do the MMA math there, I mean, I think that these two victories over James and Rong Zhu look pretty damn good. And I think that Padilla can hurt Jai in a firefight. And also, if we see one fighter have success with some takedowns or whatnot, I think that it could be Padilla that has the success there. And the other major factor that makes me want to back Chris here is the fact that he still hasn't even cracked the 30 marker. I think that he's a lot hungrier of a fighter. He's been KO'd once before. It was a long time ago. In fact, it was the first ever L he took as a pro. He sharpened up defensively. And Jai Herbert's 36 years old, and he's been finished in 4 of his 5 losses. And I think that Padilla wins this fight. And I'm going to say Padilla gets another stoppage here. I'm going to lean towards him getting some type of KO or TKO type finish. It could be like a stoppage, or it might just be a flash KO where he flattens Herbert. But I think there should be a high pace to this fight. And I like what I'm seeing from Padilla as he's landing 5.8 strikes per minute so far in his first 2 fights. Herbert at 3.16. Maybe you're a little alarmed with Padilla absorbing 4.93, but you know, those numbers will clean up. It's just kind of the way that those fights played out, if you ask me. And I think that Padilla is a fighter to keep an eye on. I do want to bring up the fact that Herbert will have about an 8-inch reach advantage. That's not something that's unfamiliar for him. Okay, he really has a solid frame for the division, and it's not really something that's foreign for Padilla. He's typically on the more compact and shorter side in his matchup. So I think that he'll be fine there. I could see him using his footwork to close the distance. Let's go take a look at the betting line, where this fight is essentially pick'em. All right, that's what we're looking at right now. Padilla is overall the underdog. I'm seeing him as high as a plus 110 right now. Okay, so I am siding with the dog here, depending on what book you're looking at for what line you can get. But consistently, he is the dog here. I expect that he would settle in as the dog based on the fact that Herbert has that hometown advantage. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see a little bit of action coming in him. I don't know, though. I'm not certain on that. Maybe we see people tuning into the show here and starting to tail me on my Padilla pick. But, you know, on a serious note, I think maybe you start to see a lot of people calling Padilla to win this fight, and you start to see a little bit of a turn. So I'm kind of torn on how the line will move. But as long as it doesn't get ridiculous either way, I think that you're better off being on the Padilla side. The UFC shows, once again, they have no issue taking these promising young flyweight fighters and just matching them up with each other early on in their UFC careers. We have Loughran, Kavanagh taking on Felipe dos Santos. Dos Santos gets another very tough fight. But let's talk about Kavanagh here for a second. This is a fighter that I am very high on. I think that he has all the ability in the world to make a run at this belt down the line. He's just 25 years old, fighting out of Great Britain top team. He had a huge KO victory on DWCS over An Ho, who has shown to be a dangerous young fighter in this division as well. And Kavanagh got him out of there in just over 2 minutes. He gets the contract. Then he faces off with Jose Ochoa, a shootbox product. The Peruvian fighter also has shown to be very dangerous. He was undefeated at the time of that fight. Now, that fight played out a lot more closely. It was a solid test for Kavanagh, but you have to love the way that Kavanagh dug deep and took that third round to solidify the fight. Two of the judges had it 1-1 going into the third round, right? So it was very important that he dug deep. He had just dropped the second round in the eyes of those two judges, was hurt to the body a little bit after that fast start in the first round. And you have to love the way that he dug deep in that third round, landing the cleaner strikes and picking up the pace. It was definitely a great learning experience for him, getting that cage time in the octagon. He's a young fighter, and he's really going to get some momentum off that match. And I'll say once again, I think that Jose Ochoa is a promising fighter. So that was a fight where he had some real danger in front of him. You could kind of say the same thing with Felipe dos Santos, although he still doesn't have one documented KO, right? You take a look at his 8 victories, not one documented KO, even though we know he could really push the pace and he's somewhat of a high-level striker for his age. I mean, this fighter, the UFC has not done him any favors when you think about the matchmaking, right? He gets a short notice UFC debut fight on that huge UFC 293 card that was headlined by Adesanya and Sean Strickland. He takes on Manel Kape. Manel Kape is a fighter that some of you guys know. I kind of feel he's the best flyweight fighter on planet Earth. You put him in there with Pantoja right now, sneak peek. I'm probably going to be picking Kape to win that fight. And they threw down. Kape was a step ahead, but I mean, come on. Talk about a learning experience for a young fighter like Dos Santos there. Then he goes out there, he gets the decision over Victor Altamirano. Then he has the Andrey Lima fight. Andrey Lima actually used grappling to kind of stifle Dos Santos there. So that's something that you have to keep an eye on. If you're Dos Santos, you definitely needed to go back to the drawing board and to have worked on some of the grappling skills, all right? The striking's there, even though we want to see more fight-ending ability, but it's there. He could hang with some of the top fighters in this division even now, I believe. I mean, we saw in the Kape fight, right? I mean, he did kind of hang in there. If he can keep this fight standing, I do believe there's potential that this is a fight that could play out closer than some people are thinking, all right? Because we're going to get to the betting line here in a second. But I think that Kavanagh in this spot should show a little bit more than he's shown in the past. I think he's going to change levels a little bit, have some success with his grappling. I think he's the more complete fighter. And then even on the feet, I do expect Kavanagh to be a little bit sharper there. He could probably push the pace late in this fight and take those later rounds, maybe the third round, even if he drops a second like he did against Ochoa. And Felipe dos Santos, this is a fight that he really needs, because even though he's young, you can't just keep going out there losing fights. I could see the UFC giving him another opportunity even after this match here, but this is a fight where he really has his back up to the wall to an extent, because he can leave the UFC and can still get another opportunity, but he doesn't want to lose this fight. He'll have that length advantage. He's a taller fighter. He'll have about a 3-inch reach advantage. I just think that Kavanagh's footwork is too good for that really to be an influence here. I think he's the better fighter overall, but let's take a look at the betting line, because that's really what we're talking about in this matchup here, because Kavanagh is right around a minus 365 favorite right now, and I'm not crazy about that, all right? I really like what he's shown us, but you run the second round back in that last fight against Ochoa, and I went through a little bit of adversity. Who's to say that Felipe dos Santos can't try to implement some of those same type of tactics, pushing the pace and trying to just put himself right in the mix to potentially get a split decision victory or something like that. Surrounds himself with good people, and I'm not crazy about the line. I really like Kavanagh, but I'm not crazy about the line here. I'm going to say that Kavanagh wins a decision. Fight's taking place at 125. We don't typically see a lot of finishes, even though Kavanagh has shown that fight-ending ability. Dos Santos is tough. He's probably going to hang in there. I have Kavanagh winning a unanimous decision. Not crazy about that line, though. You could definitely expect things to heat up when this match takes place. This is a rematch. They fought when they were amateurs, but you got Ireland versus England here, right? So the crowd should be going crazy. You got Caolán, Loughran taking on Nathan Fletcher. Fletcher did take that first amateur bout via unanimous decision. That fight took place about 7 years ago. So obviously, both of these men have grown a lot. Nathan Fletcher was on The Ultimate Fighter. You kind of look at that Con Ofley loss, not in the greatest light these days. Ofley, I believe, is now lost 2 in a row since that bout. We'll quickly look. And no, he had a victory after on The Ultimate Fighter. Then he gets knocked out by Myron Santos. How'd you guys like the decision in his last bout there? That's for another day. But then he just took an L to Muhammad Naimov. So, I mean, it just hasn't aged that well. He looked phenomenal in his last fight against Ramaska, where he was able to pull off that head and arm triangle choke. And the thing that Fletcher really has going for himself here is the fact that he has grappling abilities, right? And Loughran's a fighter that really looks to close the distance and take you down, try to ground and pound you. He's a little short and stubby. It's hard for him to really hang with fighters in this division on the feet. I mean, his striking is developing, and I understand that he does have his fair share of KOs. It's not like he hasn't had KOs on the feet. His boxing skills are decent, but I mean, he has this 66-inch wingspan. He really needs to sharpen up his striking even more so if he's going to hang around in the UFC. I think that Fletcher should get the better of the striking just with his length. The only X factor there is if things get a little wild. Yes, Loughran can KO Fletcher. That is a possibility. And real quick on that subject, you do take a look at the one knockout loss that Fletcher did have, which was against Dominique Wooding, and that wasn't that long ago. It was in Cage Warriors in 2021. He got knocked out in the third round. I believe that fight is up on YouTube as well, so we have seen him KO'd before. Even though I'm not that high in the striking abilities of Loughran right now, he has made it work at times against lower level competition. But he threatens with the takedowns, and when the fighters are worried about him taking down, sometimes he's able to unload with these uppercuts and these kind of like looping in hooks, and he's landed before. You could pull up a couple of those KOs up on YouTube. Is he going to land that strike here? I mean, it's possible, but I would lean more towards Nathan Fletcher getting the better of a straight kickboxing match, mixing in calf kicks and jabbing from the outside. If Loughran's going to look to push Fletcher up against the cage, which we've seen him do at times, and kind of hold him there, right now, that is just not working in the UFC, in the octagon. Right? I was on record saying this a couple weeks ago. Right now, judges are looking for damage and strikes to be landed more than anything. They do not care about you holding a fighter against the cage if you do no type of damage, right? And don't misunderstand that with like the Ankalaev fight, because Ankalaev, a lot of you guys didn't realize, dude, he was ripping knees to the body. We saw the broadcast team briefly mention that, but if you were actually paying attention to what was happening, he was crushing knees to the ribs of Pereira throughout that fight. I mean, you have to be landing some kind of damage, but if you're talking about the Francis Marshall versus Myron Santos fight, not saying Francis Marshall didn't win that fight, but you didn't see Marshall really looking to land any damage. He did solidify that takedown at the end of the third, but I'm talking about when you're shooting takedowns and you're not really getting a lot of success with them, but then you're ending up against the cage after the failed attempt and you're holding them there. It's almost like the judges will look at that in a negative light, right? And I think that with the judges looking at fights in that light right now, it favors Fletcher even more so, because that's kind of Loughran's style. But you never know. Sometimes things will open up. I hope that this ends up being more of an entertaining fight, which it may. But even then, Fletcher has solid jiu-jitsu skills. You take a look at his 9 victories. 7 of them have come by way of sub. I think that he'll even get the better of the grappling exchanges if it goes there. On the feet, I like him there as well. So you have to lean towards Fletcher's way. I will be rooting for Loughran if I don't have an official play locked in on this, because I do have a little bit of Irish descent in me, and I'm always backing my Irish blood there. I hope Loughran wins the fight. Like I said, if I don't end up having to lock in a play in Fletcher, depending on what we see in the line. But should be a fun fight. Crowd should be going crazy. Give me Nathan Fletcher to win another unanimous decision, just as he did when they were amateurs. And let's see what kind of line we're talking about for this one. Right now, Nathan Fletcher is a -170. And seeing some slight action come in the other way. Very slight action. It's early on. I wouldn't be shocked if the line closes a little bit more so. Loughran, you think of the Jake Hadley fight. He came up short against Hadley, the fellow Englishman there. And Hadley has since been released from the UFC. I think that Fletcher has all the abilities to do exactly what Hadley did in that fight, which if you check the numbers, Hadley outlanding him 107-68, having a good amount of success, stuffing takedowns, or at the very least working his way back up to his feet. Loughran was just 1 of 8 on his takedown attempts. All right. So, and then you think of that Fletcher fight, man. Fletcher, even before finding the sub, having his own success, getting that fight down to the mat, 3 minutes and 10 seconds of control time, 4 of 6 on takedowns. He outstruck Ramaska 40-12. I mean, Fletcher is a fighter to keep an eye on, but this should be a good one. Give me Fletcher via unanimous decision. We got some ranked heavyweight action set to take place here between the number 8 Marcin Tybura and number 13 recently ranked Mick Parkin, who still hasn't even turned 30 yet. In this division, he's just an absolute baby. 29 in the heavyweight division is very similar to, let's say, the 24-year-old flyweights that we're talking about. All right, just to put things into perspective, Parkin, a major training partner of Tom Aspinall. Tom Aspinall and their camp have planned to face off with Tybura before. Recently, Aspinall went out there and KO'd Tybura, so that's something that Parkin has going for himself. Mick Parkin's a fighter that I really do believe has potential in this division. I would like to see him clean up his diet, I would say. I would like to see him come in a little bit better shape, but technically, he has solid striking abilities, solid grappling abilities, very similar to his training partner Aspinall, just obviously at a lower level. But when you're talking Tom Aspinall, you're talking about the greatest heavyweight on planet Earth, at least in my opinion. Hopefully we will get to see him square off with John Jones in the near future. Parkin has had rapid success dating back to that DWCS fight where he went out there and got his first ever pro sub over Eduardo Neves. Now, even though he showed pretty solid submission ability in that fight, it was only his first ever sub, like I said, and Tybura is very polished with his grappling, so I'm interested to see how that plays out. I think that Parkin would definitely want to keep this fight standing. He's going to want to stuff takedowns and use his kickboxing ability, which seems to be a little bit more promising to me. We've seen him go out there and decision Jamal Pogues, Chao Machado, and Muhammad Usman. The Usman and Pogues fight, he went through slight adversity. I thought that he did show character in those bouts, though. He dug deep and he got the better of those striking exchanges. And those fights eventually led him up to that last performance where he went out there and knocked out Lucas Brzeski. These fighters are more low level than a Tybura, even a Tybura that is 39 years old, okay? And I know Tybura very well. I've been backing him on official plays very often as of recently. It cost me in one in the Sergey Spivak rematch. He did get that takedown, which is what I was hoping for, but he did fall into that armbar, which was very suspect. You don't typically see him fall into a sub like that, but you have to love the way he bounced back against Jonathan Deniz. I backed him in that spot. Deniz, a polished and talented kickboxer, but just so untested with his grappling, and you always know that Tybura will look to test you there. He will look to take you down, and that's what I could see him doing in this bout. Now, Tybura could kind of hang with you on the feet as well, but he does suffer from Frankenstein syndrome. We've seen it throughout the years, and even in fights where he's up, he will get a little lethargic and he will be landed on in a major way and he will get KO'd. You think about the Derek Lewis fight, and of course, Derek Lewis, one of the greatest knockouts that we've ever seen in the heavyweight division. But I mean, Tybura has been knocked out in 5 of his 9 losses, okay? More than half of his losses come by way of KO. Mick Parkin has 6 KO victories out of his 10 victories, and he shows to be pretty polished there. And even though he has no problem out voluming you and going to a decision, this is the heavyweight division. Tybura is 39 years old. I think that Parkin's going to get a KO here. I think he's going to be able to stuff the takedowns of Tybura for the most part and hold his own there. And I like the youngster here. I really do. I think that he has some solid potential, even though he has to tweak some things up, but he's surrounding himself with some good people here. And Parkin is a much more complete fighter than a Jonathan Deniz. Okay, so I don't see Tybura exposing him like that. We'll see. You take a look at the betting line. Let's see what we're talking about here, boys. We're seeing Mick Parkin as the dog, okay? He's as high as a plus 110. Actually, he's as high as a plus 125 right now on some of these books. So this is another dog that I'm backing here. I love the youth he has going for himself, and I think that we should expect to see some strides in his game. And even without the strides, even from what we've seen as of recently, I like him in this spot, and I'll get him to land a KO. I'm going to say Tybura makes another blatant mistake in the cage that costs him to not only lose, but to be finished. Give me Parkin via KO. Hey guys, so check this out. I'm going to give you some behind the scenes insight here. Maybe you notice all of a sudden I got a haircut in this little segment. And as we get to the Molly McCann versus Alexia Thanara fight, I'll look like this. And maybe my voice sounds a little ruffled because I just suddenly caught a head cold last night. I'm just editing this video right now. And of course, Molly McCann now has a new opponent. I'm very excited to break down the new fight. I already recorded the Estela Nunez versus Molly McCann segment. This is a much better fight. So you will see me much more enthusiastic as we get to that segment. But I also want to say last night we hit 10,000 followers on IG. That's a big milestone for me, man. I'm big on Instagram at MMA Fortune Teller. I put a lot of work into IG. I'm much bigger into that than Twitter. I love my Twitter as well, at the MMA Tellerband, but I've been grinding on IG. Maybe some of you guys don't know this, but I used to have an IG account that had a great following. I was past 10K followers a long time ago, and I posted some footage with a UFC fight mixed into it. It was actually Jessica and Gerard, like a KO reel, and IG completely vanished my IG account. It was kind of crazy. I got the email that said Zuffa put a copyright claim on me. Never got one warning. And ever since then, man, I went back to the drawing board, grinded back to 10K. Now, it did take me a little longer to get back up to the 10K than my last account. I think that has something to do with the fact that the market's just more saturated, or for whatever the reasons are. But I'll tell you what, man, all of the growth that I've gotten there and here on YouTube, it's all been organic growth. All right. And I want to give a real shout out to all of you guys that follow me over there or that are subscribed to me here on the channel. It's all organic. I haven't put 1 cent into advertising or anything like that. Okay. And that's something that I'm going to start doing. I'm going to start doing the sponsored ads on IG and trying to promote my brand here. As you guys know, I'm brewing something else behind the scenes. So I'm actually going to start putting some money behind getting my product out. So you should really start to see an increase in my numbers. And the point of me making this little segment here is that I really appreciate you guys, and it means a lot to me. And I'm very excited for the next mile marker, which will be the 50K. All right. And then we'll ease our way to 100K. And I think that we're really going to start snowballing here. All right, guys. So thank you so much. Potential trap alert. Okay. This is going to be a new segment that I do every full card breakdown episode. We're going to point to one fight that is the most alarming to potentially be a trap alert. And I'll give you a sneak peek when we get to the odds here. Okay. We're talking about a major potential trap alert because this line is wide. Let's dive into the matchup. At middleweight, Andrey Pulyaev makes his UFC debut coming off that big upset performance on Dana White's Contender Series, all right, where he pulled the upset off on Liam Anderson, who's a fighter that a lot of people have been keeping an eye on, or had that wrestling ability, a hard-nosed fighter, and Pulyaev went out there, and we'll talk a little bit more about that fight here in a second. So he's taken on Christian Leroy Duncan. I want to talk about CLD here for a second. Still hasn't cracked the 30 marker. CLD is a fighter that I was very high on coming in to the UFC. The former Cage Warriors champ. We had a major target on him right off the rip. If you guys remember, we had him dished out in that string of free official plays that I was doing where every single one was hitting. And we actually had him not only to win that fight, but to win inside the distance. He won it in a weird way, though. If you guys remember, Dusko Trzovic was injured. He had that knee injury. You could say that CLD kind of set it up with some calf kicks, but I don't know about all that. Since that performance, the Armand Petrosian one, that was a tough one. All right. That really was. When you take a look at the numbers here, some of these judges had him winning or had him losing 30-27. All right. He was outstruck on the significant strikes, 89-59. And Petrosian, say what you will about him having some kickboxing abilities. I've never been that high on him. You guys saw I picked against him again in his last fight. I went with the dog, Bruno Ferreira, put some money in my pocket there. Petrosian's just, he's not that game. I mean, who gets hit with the double spinning back fist KO? I don't know. All right, so that wasn't a good look for CLD. The two victories that he strung off after that are low level against Claudio Ribeiro and Dennis Teolinin. And then the Gregory Rodriguez fight that he just had recently, he drops that one. Gregory Rodriguez shows to be a step ahead. So I just don't know what to think about CLD. Since coming down to the middleweight division, which I think suits him much better than where he has fought before. I know he's putting some work at 205. I mean, this is a solid division for him as far as his frame goes. He has solid kickboxing abilities. Maybe those two losses were just learning experiences for him. But I definitely think you could pump the brakes on the CLD hype train. And forget about making a run at the title. I mean, this is a fighter that really has to have solid performances to just maintain a roster spot. I mean, maybe I'm being a little harsh on him, but if you keep matching him up with these dangerous men in this division, and you get these sleeper fighters, like in the case of Andrey Pulyaev, who trains under Alexander Shlemenko, who is a nasty man. I've always been a huge fan of Alexander Shlemenko, the longtime Bellator kingpin over there, training fighters like Andrei Koreshkov. I know Koreshkov is a big training partner of Pulyaev as well. I'm very high on Koreshkov. I had the pleasure to meet him, bumped into him at a Nordstrom rack one time, was swiping the shirts and saw Koreshkov, got a little picture with him, and I was always a huge Koreshkov fan. I mean, these fighters have nasty striking. Their grappling is up to par as well, and we saw it from Pulyaev when he faced off against Liam Anderson, okay? He was able to stuff the takedowns and use his striking abilities. He fights out of the southpaw stance. He's been putting in a lot of work over at AKA Thailand. His striking is there. I think he could hang with CLD. I think obviously he can keep the fight standing. CLD really hasn't shown to be any type of threat there. So this should be a kickboxing match. And I think that this fight is a lot closer than what the line is saying. So we'll just jump right over to the line. I mean, there's really not too much else to talk about here. CLD is as high as a -650. All right, I am not in agreement with that line. The comeback on Pulyaev is as high as a +475. That's where the value lies. I still will pick CLD because in a straight kickboxing match, I mean, he shows to have a little bit more. He's a little bit more proven. I could see him outpointing Pulyaev. I think this fight probably goes to a decision, even though CLD does get a lot of finishes. Pulyaev, I believe, only KO'd once. I think that this fight goes to the final bell, even though there will be a high pace to it. CLD probably outpoints him here, but why would you be chalking up a -650? It just makes no sense. Pulyaev was overlooked in that last fight against Anderson. He sailed in right around a +210, and he has no problem coming in as the dog and shaking things up. So don't be surprised if we see something like that take place. Without a doubt, one of my most anticipated fights of the card, Ireland and India stand up. You're going to see that green, white, and orange just glistening in the arena. We got Shauna, Bannon taking out Puja, Tomar. And, check it out, guys. Both 31 years old. These fighters have a lot of similarities coming into this matchup. Interestingly enough, Bannon just has a 1-inch reach advantage, and she's just an inch taller. Okay, so I didn't expect that to be the case when I was breaking down tape. So they're more evenly matched there than some may have thought. Both these fighters come off controversial decisions. And you guys let me know, because I'm sure a lot of you guys were upset about the Puja Tomar decision over Ryan Amanda. You take a look at the numbers, and you see that the total strikes did favor Tomar 99-86, but it was the significant strikes that were being landed by Dos Santos. But even then, still, they had it at 84-95. Okay, but that's a little bit deceiving, right? Because one significant strike compared to another significant strike, they're not exactly the same. You could almost have another category of significant, right? At least for the division, because it was Dos Santos landing heavier. I had no problem with the decision. I had a feeling when we went to the judges' scorecards that she probably was going to get her hand raised, or it could have easily went either way. I remember people were going crazy about it. But I thought that Tomar overall, even if you had her losing that fight, she had a good showing of herself. She circled very well. And fighting out of that southpaw stance, she was hitting Ram with kicks and landing some strikes. And she showed to be decently competent. And if she can keep a fight standing in this division, in the women's strawweight division, you could easily see her sneaking off a split decision over a lot of the fighters in it, right? If you're able to just keep those strikes landing, even if they're not with a lot of oomph, and you go to the judges' scorecards in this division, you could potentially get your hand raised. Now, Bannon, a lot of people thought that she should have dropped that last fight against Elise Ardeline, which she did outstrike her 151-80 on the total strikes. Okay, the significant strikes were a little bit closer, but Ardeline controlled her for over an entire round at 5 minutes and 54 seconds. Okay, so Bannon was lacking a little bit with her takedown defense. I don't think that's going to be as much of an issue here with Tomar. I expect this to be more of a striking affair. And if anything, I think that Bannon may even show to have some grappling that she could pull out of her back pocket here. But I do expect this to be a striking affair. I'm going to lean towards Bannon's way. I think that Bannon will be the fighter that lands the more significant strikes, similar to that last fight. And I think it's going to be harder for Tomar to sneak out a decision like that with the crowd rooting for Bannon. I expect the crowd to be behind Bannon there. And I think that Bannon's going to win a unanimous decision. Maybe it's 29-28, but she really solidifies 2 of the 3 rounds. It could even be a 30-27 type of fight, but it should be fun. Okay, this should be a fun one, you guys. Don't be so hard on it. We'll see how it plays out. Bannon kind of has a personality, and I think that Tomar, if some things go the right way, she could end up being an interesting fighter in the division. And I'm sure the memes will commence after this fight. And if you guys aren't following me on IG, you're slipping, because I'm dropping the Sunday dump every Sunday. I mean, that's becoming a weekly movie. If you guys don't know what I'm talking about, go check out my IG at MMA Fortune Teller. And I will side with Shauna Bannon here. Let's take a look at the line, where we will see that Bannon is a -205 favorite. I see her as low as a -180. I'm interested to see where this line's going to go, because if you're reaching for Bannon as she's a -220, 230, I think you're definitely slacking there. This fight, even with that hometown edge, I know it's not in Ireland, but she'll have that hometown edge. Even then, this is still a fight where the judges might just like the volume of Tomar. and things might just get ugly in there. So, I mean, you want to be with the dog in that spot, but if you can get Bannon as low as minus 180, 185, where I have seen her currently on some books, I don't have a problem with that. Okay, because you're not really in fear of a KO. You're not going to get knocked out. I don't really think you're in fear of getting submitted. This is a pitter-patter type of fight, and you should have the cards in your favor. Jordan Vucenic takes on Chris Duncan at 155. Vucenic recently made his UFC debut, took it on short notice after recently moving up to this division, right? He spent a lot of time down at 145. That was a tough matchup for him against Guram, right? He fell short, but that fight was somewhat competitive, right? Before that, just putting in work, pulling off submissions left and right. You take a look at both of the Paul Hughes fights, right? He won the first one via split decision. A lot of people thought that he shouldn't have got the nod there, and that fight should have still allowed Paul Hughes to have that O next to his name. And you could really argue, I mean, we'll pull it up real quick. If you guys aren't familiar with Paul Hughes, he arguably should be 15-0 right now. A lot of people had him winning against Usman Nurmagomedov. Paul Hughes, I mean, he could be a superstar in the UFC right now who could be undefeated. I mean, we could have had him being the next Irish phenom. Obviously, a completely different type of personality of what Conor McGregor had, but still, I mean, I think the UFC was slacking, not getting him signed, just to bring that up here for a second. But listen, no matter how you look at the Paul Hughes victory that he had back in 2020 that went to a split decision, and even if you look at the 5-minute war that he went with him in 2022 over at Cage Warriors, those fights aged very well because Paul Hughes is very high level. Besides that, he's been looking great. We talked about the Guram fight. That fight doesn't look bad at all for him either, taking that fight on short notice. I think that Vucenic is the real deal. I think that he's going to solidify himself as a solid UFC caliber fighter. On the other hand, Chris Duncan is a fighter that I've been on record saying he just gets away with murder in there, man. This dude is a magician. He pulls off victories that he should not be pulling off, even dating back to the Charlie Campbell fight. Now, he was about to be KO'd. Campbell got sloppy and ran into a nasty counter. I mean, you got to give him credit for landing it. You got to give him credit for having the heart to sit in there and still throw fire back when you're about to be finished. And you got to give him credit there. After that, goes out there, defeats Omar Morales and Yanal Ashmos, two low-level fighters. We saw a little bit of evolution in his game throughout both of those fights. We know he's been training at American Top Team, so you'll see development there. But then he gets subbed by Manuel Torres in the first round, and that leads us up to the last fight where he pulls off that magic once again. He pulls off a guillotine choke over Balaji Oki. Oki was touching him up in that fight. In my opinion, he would have easily had the knockout. Oki would have had the KO victory if he would have just slowed down a little bit. And even then, we saw Oki was a little stronger in those wrestling scrambles, but he just stuck his head into a guillotine, which is a very elementary choke that you guys know I know a lot about, and it's really not something you should be getting caught in. Okay, but you'll give Duncan some credit there too, just showing that he has that in his back pocket. But good luck pulling off a guillotine choke on Vucenic. I don't see that happening. And to cut to the chase, man, I think that Vucenic can keep this fight standing where he's the more polished striker. Duncan can try to throw those calf kicks and try to hang a little bit with the striking, but eventually he will get caught with the strike. I think that we see Duncan get knocked out. I'm not a fan of him defensively. I think Vucenic is more fluid, and this is a solid matchup for him. I think Vucenic gets that first ever UFC victory, and I think that he gets it in a major way. He gets a KO over Chris Duncan. All right, so I mean, I'll just cut to the chase there. I like what I've seen from Vucenic. Now, he's a minus 355 right now. He's right around that range. We're seeing him from like a minus 330 up to a minus 355. That's a pretty steep line, I guess you could say. But I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that the value's in the dog. I really believe that this is a tough matchup for Duncan, and I just can't see him pulling off that magic once again. All right. So not only does he lose, I think that he gets finished. Here we go. You know we're going to have some fun with this one. So make sure you strap your seatbelts up. Kevin Holland takes on Gunnar Nelson. I love this matchup. First off, I've always been a huge Gunnar Nelson fan, okay, dating way back, even before he joined the UFC. I think his career has been very unfortunate. He's obviously not fully committed to the fight game. I mean, you take a look at how active he's been throughout the last 6 years. It's just not a good look for him, but he is very talented. He has some of the nastiest BJJ that we've seen in this division. He has nasty striking. You take a look at Conor McGregor's striking as it developed throughout the years, and I think it really, a lot of what he looked to do was mirrored and copied off Gunnar Nelson, being very light on his feet, having that karate type of style, but implementing it into a cage fight. Nelson is high level, man. I'm telling you guys right now. And if a couple things would have went differently, he could have been a fighter that made a run at the belt. All right, we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But Kevin Holland, listen, the elephant in the room. Kevin Holland, and guys, I'm having some fun with this, so please don't take it serious because I know some of you guys are big Holland fans, but Holland is one of two arch nemesis that I've had in this fight game for one reason or another. Of course, Brian Kelleturd, who you guys saw, man, you just don't want to go up against the teller, man. I'll give you that bad juju. You'll go on a bad run, and you'll eventually be cut by the UFC. And if Kevin Holland loses this fight, which he is then going to be 3-7 in his last 10 fights. Okay, so you could potentially talk about cutting this dude, and you talk about a fighter that's not fully committed to the fight game like Gunnar Nelson. I think you could say the same thing about Kevin Holland. I mean, he just does not seem to be there in his fights. He's got a stale personality. All right, me and him went at it. If you guys don't know the whole thing, man, I didn't like his energy, and I kind of brought some of that negativity back to him. And, it was a learning experience for me too. But, being on the World Wide Web, having people come at you and all that stuff, it was kind of funny. But you take a look at the energy that he brought into that recent interview with Rampage Jackson on the Jackson podcast, man, this dude is just, I don't think he's a good dude. All right. I got multiple messages from people saying that when they saw him in public, asking to take a picture, that he was very unfriendly. He either declined some of them as well. The kid, if you guys saw that viral video where he took a picture with that kid and then he kind of like cursed him out, pushed him away, tried to say he grabbed his butt. I don't know. Those kids reached out to me. They constantly reach out to me, those kids there, trying to get on the show and explain themselves. But I'm not doing that. I got bigger things going on. But, they tried to explain their story and they just said that he was very unfriendly and that was all nonsense. And they don't know why he was the way he was. But so many people have told me that he's not friendly. And you guys saw it against Rampage. The reason why he used to drive me nuts is because everyone was such a fan of Kevin Holland's and they talked about him being this fan favorite type of fighter because he talks a little bit while he fights. I mean, I don't know. I think he's been one of the most overrated fighters as far as his abilities, his personality. Dude's stale. I don't know why all you guys like him so much. I don't know why he has the platform that he's had, being in commercials and whatnot. There's so many other fighters that are so much more pleasant to watch. All right. So that's all I'll say about that. I think he's just going to drop this fight. Gunnar Nelson has the higher level BJJ. We've seen Kevin Holland struggle down there. He's been sub 4 times out of all his losses, but specifically as of recently, we're seeing him getting subbed with ease. Or René de Ritter, that was one of the only people I saw picking him to win that fight. Look how what he did. Look at what he did. Took him down, got the sub in the first round with ease. Of course, the loss he took to Khamzat Chimaev. I mean, Chimaev is a different animal, but still another very quick sub loss. Got knocked out by Roman Dolidze in the first, or finished in the first round. However you want to look at that, man, I've been fading him left and right. I've been catching dog odds on the opposition. It's been very, very pleasant. I mean, how about the Michael Page, the MVP matchup? MVP makes his UFC debut. I make an official free play video for you guys there. Easy money. Okay, guys. So I'm telling you right now, all right, Gunnar Nelson is the much more complete fighter. If he comes into this fight motivated and ready to go, which I don't see any reason why he wouldn't, even though he's not the most inactive, when he shows up, he's ready to go. I mean, this dude's built differently. You take a look at what he did to Brian Barberena in his last fight. He had a victory over Takashi Sato before that. You take a look at his losses, okay? He went to a split decision with Leon Edwards. If he would have got the nod in that fight, okay, the trajectory of his career would have went so much differently. Also, the Santiago Ponzinibbio fight, that's my boy, Santiago. That fight, that was a dirty one. Ponzinibbio poked him right in the eye brutally. The referee doesn't stop the fight, and then he's basically knocking out, hitting a fighter that was blind. I mean, that was grimy, if you guys remember how that played out. I think that Gunnar Nelson wins that fight if that doesn't happen. I mean, Gunny could have made a run at the belt, and like I said, if he just shows up and he's even half of what he has shown us at his best, he's better than Kevin Holland here. I mean, I can go on and on about it. I won't bore you guys with more details. I think I made it very clear. Nelson can outstrike Holland. I mean, yeah, at the end of the day, he still has to be careful not to get caught with the KO. Holland still does possess power. We saw what he did to Buckley back in the day. He has a long wingspan. If you get caught at the end of one of his punches, you can be finished. But I mean, all in all, Gunny's the way to go here. Let's take a look at the line for this fight. He is currently a -155. That's what we're seeing out there. He's opening up right around -135. So we're seeing action coming in on Gunny. People are waking up to the fact that Holland is not as good of a fighter as you guys all thought that he was. All right, I faded him in the Wonder Boy fight. I was there live for it, cashing underdog tickets there. Okay, I've cashed so many underdog tickets, fading Holland, just to show you guys how much you've overhyped him and you guys overvalue his abilities. All right, just because he can talk while he fights. Gunny, go ahead to my lightweight. and get that submission. Gunny Nelson gets a submission in this fight, first or second round sub. Two former Cage Warrior champs facing off here. The crowd should like this one. Nathaniel Wood takes on Morgan Charrière. Both these fighters nearing the primes of their career. I mean, they really have a lot left to offer the fight game. This is a good time for this matchup to take place. I'm excited to see how it plays out. Morgan Charrière, I mean, just to cut to the chase, this is a fighter that I think has a much higher ceiling than a Nathaniel Wood. When you think of the striking abilities that Morgan possesses, I mean, he is looking more dangerous than ever. We see the grappling starting to catch up. He comes in off a devastating KO victory over Gabriel Miranda. Although Miranda's a low-level fighter, specifically with the striking, you still see how dangerous Morgan is there. I mean, Morgan could really go out there and hurt anybody in this division on the right night. A lot of people, including myself, had him defeating Chepe Mariscal, who is a high-level fighter, in my opinion. I really like the abilities that Mariscal has. So that was a good showing for Charrière. In fact, I would say that fight showed his potential more than any other on his resume. Okay, just going to war with a fighter of the level of Mariscal, showing to defend takedowns at times or work his way back up to his feet, just showing to be more complete than he used to be in the past. And again, a lot of people thought that he should have won that fight. So essentially, you look at him right now as still being undefeated in the UFC. Before that, he has another quick knockout over a low-level fighter, and Zaccini, the Italian. If you scroll down through his resume, you're going to see some solid names that he faced off with over in Cage Warriors, fighters that we just were talking about in Jordan Vucenic, Paul Hughes. All right, so he's been in there with respectable names, and although he has some scattered losses to some unrecognizable names back in the day, just note that a lot of those fights were 6, 7, 8 years ago, and I really believe that this is just a fighter that has refined his skill set so much more compared to the 23-year-old version of himself. So I really like the striking abilities that he has. I think he obviously has the striking edge here over Nathaniel Wood, even though Nathaniel Wood's not a bad striker, like technically, and he's had some knockouts back in the day, but those finishing abilities that he showed in the regional scene really haven't translated into the octagon. When he's fighting higher level fighters, he's not really typically getting them out of there with the strikes. He shows grappling abilities as well. You could say Wood is the more well-rounded fighter, but it's not going to cut it, because with the rapid growth in Charrière's takedown defense to go along with having the striking advantage, I mean, that's the more important factors in this fight. I see him stuffing takedowns, or at the very least, if his butt touches the canvas for a second, he's bouncing back up. He's landing the more damaging strikes. And as we talked about earlier in the video, right now, we are seeing the judges lean more towards damage and strikes landed more than we've ever seen before. That favors Charrière, in my opinion. And then also, Wood has had some suspect performances. Yeah, he just bounced back with the victory over Pineda. But the Naimov fight was a fight that he looked kind of suspect there. I'm not that high in Naimov. I mean, you could say he's a decent fighter, but still, I didn't really like the way that Wood looked in that fight. And really, when you scroll through all of his victories, they haven't aged that well. Charles Jourdain, a lot of losses in the UFC. Andre Fili, I don't know. I like Fili, but that was, you talk about his last performance. Charles Rosa, a very tough dude, a great guy, but took a lot of L's later on in his UFC career. So I don't know how much merit you guys put into that. Just all signs are pointing towards Charrière getting the nod in this spot here, but it starts with him keeping this fight standing and creating space, using his athleticism and his quickness to outland Wood and potentially even get a knockout. Okay, I mean, it's not out of the realm that he gets a KO. Wood's been knocked out twice before out of his 6 losses, right? 33% of his losses come by way of KO, and Charrière has almost half of his victories coming by way of KO, and his striking is high level. He can hit you with the head kick, he can box your ears off, he can do all that. So, we'll see how that goes. I will lean towards Charrière winning via decision at the end of the day. I'm not going to pick him to get that knockout, even though I do believe that it is possible. And he is right around a -190. He's just under a -200. He's just under a 2-1 favorite all across the board as of now. We'll see how the line movement goes. But I do expect him, of course, to settle in as about a 2-1 favorite, which is it's interesting, I would say, to an extent. If you put a little bit of respect on Nathaniel Wood's name, some people may think this is a fight that's a little closer, especially if this fight were to be made a couple of years back. The line would be very different. Okay, but the line's actually warranted, so it's an accurate line. I don't mind it. I'd rather side with the favorite here, even with the line being where it is. we got the newly added match of Molly McCann versus Alexia Thanara, as Thanara steps in on short notice, replacing Estela Nunez, who had visa issues. All right, this is a completely different type of matchup. Molly McCann goes from being the favorite to the dog. We'll get to those odds here in a second. I already recorded the Nunez versus Molly McCann segment. If you guys notice, I look different. I got the cut. I kind of talked about that in that one little brief video, if you guys caught that here earlier in the video. But if you missed it, this is a newly added match. As I'm doing the editing, I woke up and I'm breaking down this fight, and this is a fight that I'm much more excited for. Thanara had one of the greatest performances that we've seen on Dana White's Contender Series as far as women's mixed martial arts goes. I mean, she went out there as a dog against a respectable fighter, and one that she was very familiar with, right? One that she's trained with before in Rose, the former LFA champion. All right. And she went out there and essentially dismantled her, really, as the fight progressed. When you take a look at the numbers, she outstruck her 111 to 56 on total strikes, 101 to 46 on significant strikes. She was 3 for 3 on her takedowns. That's a key point, because the way that she timed those takedowns, it was impressive. And we know that Molly McCann struggles there at times. I think that that's an edge that Thanara has. All right. People are kind of looking at Thanara like she's just this ultimate striker, which she really is proving to be, especially for a 27-year-old. I mean, she's very talented with her striking. But take note, out of her 11 victories, 6 of them come by way of sub. And you'll see some familiar names on her resume that she's went out there and subbed. You'll see a lot of rear naked chokes. She had a RNC over Ryan Amanda, and I want to highlight that. We'll circle back to that performance there in a second. But the lone loss that she did have was a sub loss to Bruna Brazil, where she was caught in a guillotine choke. That fight took place back in 2019. Okay, that was 6 years ago. She was just 21 at the time. All right, just a young girl. I think she's really came a long way. She's very exciting and fun to watch. You got to love the hairstyle. If you guys caught that fight on DWCS, man, she has the braids going around the side with the fro up in the top. It kind of reminds me of something from like The Outsiders, like one of those dudes with the bandana around her head. I mean, she's bad, dude. She's a bad girl. I was really impressed with what I've seen from her, and I think that she has a very bright future. Okay, when it comes to Molly McCann, 34 years old. Like I said, I had previously recorded that segment against with her fight being against Estela Nunez, and I had her winning that fight. I mean, that was a complete layup matchup for her. That's what the UFC wanted to do. They wanted to give her a big victory in her home country and try to work her to a couple more big fights before she's over the hump, because she's getting there, man. She's hitting that mid-marker in her 30s. Everything flips on its back now, okay? Because sneak peek, if you guys aren't catching on, I have her losing this fight. I have her dropping this fight in her home country, and she'll be on a 2-fight losing skid. She would have then been 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 4 in her last 5 fights. I mean, I don't know where she goes next from this. She's an above average striker. There's no question about that. She has plus power. I mean, she can knock you out, and she's talented there, but I just don't think that, I know that she was never able to put the overall game together to be competing in the top 15 of this division. And we're not going to see it. Okay. She had that bounce back armbar submission after getting caught in an armbar against Storolienko. All right. She had the bounce back victory over Diane Belbita. Belbita is low level. All right. I love watching Belbita. You know, the UFC can keep her around all they want there, but I mean, don't put too much merit into that sub. She's not going to go out there and pull off a sub like that over Thanara, in my opinion. I just don't see it. I think that Thanara gets the better of the striking exchanges. She'll have about a 2.5-inch reach advantage. She's athletic. She moves very well. Now, if the fight does stay standing, or if Thanara fights a matchup like that, which wouldn't be advisable just to sit there and trade. I mean, she can hold her own, and she may get the better of the striking, but Molly McCann will be able to hang with her and could potentially be live to pull off the upset, especially with the crowd in her favor. So any strike she lands, the crowd's going to go crazy. But Thanara, I would heavily advise her to change levels. I think she could definitely time some takedowns and set up a submission, which is actually where I'm going to go with this. I'm going to say that she gets a rear naked choke here. How about that? A rear naked choke. But on the feet, I still have her outlanding Molly McCann and getting the better of those exchanges. But be wary if it plays out somewhat close, because the judges will lean towards Molly McCann's way. I expect the crowd to be going crazy for any strike that McCann throws. And McCann does throw some flashy stuff at times. You'll see her throw a little spinning elbow or something like that, something wild. The crowd will go crazy. She has heavy hands. But you take a look at these numbers real quick, though, for Thanara. This is all based off that DWCS fight, landing 6.73 while only absorbing 3.0 0.7. Molly McCann, decent numbers there with the volume, but also absorbing a good amount. Thinara was tagged a little bit. I mean, we talked about the numbers. She wasn't hit that much, but she did get hit with a couple big shots. Maybe Molly McCann could crack her a little bit, but I don't see it. I like Thinara to get the job done here. And check it out, man. She is opening up right around a 2-1 favorite, right? She's right around a -200. You see her from a -190 to a -200 right now as the fight was just announced. That's impressive to be coming into your UFC debut, very young and green, and to be as big of a favorite as she is against a danger striker who's fighting in her home country. That's impressive. And there's a reason why that line is like that. Give me Thinara to get a submission victory in this fight. I'll say a second round sub for Thinara as Molly McCann gets very frustrated as she's getting taken out a couple times, 2 or 3 times. She's going to get frustrated and get a little bit too eager to get back up to her feet, and she's going to get caught with the rear naked choke. As far as where the value lies on this line, this is a little tough for me here to say because that's kind of steep. You could argue that the value's in the dog here, but I'm going to actually say I'd rather be on the Thinara side still. With anything 200 and down, I would actually still rather be on the Thinara side. I really like what I see from her, and I do not trust Molly McCann's grappling abilities. Hey guys, sorry to interrupt the show, but I just had to say, I want to thank you for all the support that you guys have given me over here at the channel. The subscriber count is consistently going up. Cannot wait to hit that 20K marker, and I damn sure can't wait to hit that 100K marker, get that little trophy behind me. But thank you guys. Hit that like button if you could. Subscribe to the channel if you're new here. It means a lot to me. I cannot wait to show you guys the growth with this channel. And I also want to let you guys know, if anyone is wondering about working with me for my official plays, do not hesitate to reach out to me. I'll give you further information there. You can email me or shoot me a DM on Instagram or Twitter. All right, guys, thank you. Back to the show. In the co-main event, we have a big one for the future of the light heavyweight division. Jan Blachowicz makes his return to the octagon. He is still ranked number 3 in this division. Okay, he's coming off somewhat of a controversial, at the very least, a close fight to Alex Pereira, who just lost his belt. Right, that fight took place a while ago. Now he's taking on Carlos Ulberg, who's ranked 6th. Carlos Ulberg is some of the more fresh blood towards the top of this division. We got to take a look at what's going on here because this fight, it's really important to what's going to happen in the near future. If Prochazka bounces back with the victory here, of course he is still in the mix. He had a very closely contested match against Ankalaev before he had another closely contested match against Alex Pereira. Pereira and Ankalaev are probably going to run that fight back, right? I mean, all signs are pointing towards us seeing a rematch. Now, personally, I would like to see Ankalaev versus Yuri Prochazka next. That's a match that we've never seen yet. Prochazka's coming off that crazy war with Jamal Hill. I would like to see a new matchup there. And on the other hand, I think that Alex Pereira would do a service to himself to bump up to the heavyweight division and go on a journey to become a 3 weight class champion, right? To have been a champion in the middleweight division, light heavyweight division, and the heavyweight division. I would like to see him do that. I think that would carry more weight than even getting redemption on Ankalaev. So, I mean, we'll see how that goes. And quite honestly, I don't think the rematch is going to go good for him. I think that Ankalaev proved to be the superior fighter. Some of you guys may disagree with me. I know I'm ruffling some feathers here. It's nothing but love towards you guys, but I know there's a lot of Pereira fans, and I heard you guys saying that was a robbery or the fight should have went his way. That had me mind blown. I had it Ankalaev 4-1, maybe 3-2. You can go there, but I even gave that 5th round to Ankalaev. People could say that he was being boring or whatnot, but I mean, he was outlanding Pereira. He was the aggressor. He was aggressing for almost 80% of the fight. Pereira did nothing. Okay, he stuffed 10 takedowns, but he did nothing offensively, and people were underestimating the knees that Ankalaev was landing in the clinch, and he was just outlanding him. Quite simple. So give me some feedback, guys. I'm sure some of you guys disagree. Give me some feedback, but when you're talking the future of this division, if Ulberg wins this fight, okay, he is the fresh blood. And he may be next in line. Maybe there's one more fight he has before he's fighting for the belt. But you got to believe that fighters like Jamal Hill and Khalil Roundtree, who both recently have been taking L's, they're a little bit a ways away. Rakic has lost 3 fights in a row. The other big fight is Nikita Krylov and Dominic Reyes. The winner of that will be in the mix as well. And then another fighter to keep an eye on is Azamat Mirzakhanov, who is just he's undefeated 14-0 and just keeps going out there and getting the job done. So just putting things into perspective here. Carlos Ulberg is 34. You may think that that's creeping up to being an older fighter, but in this division, he's a youngster. All right, he's a youngster, and he has a lot of bright years ahead of him. Blachowicz at 42. All right, that puts things into perspective. even the recent success that Blachowicz has had, it's been in his 40s, right? That last fight that he had against Pereira, it took place about a year and a half ago or so. And, depending on how you scored the grappling or the damage being landed is kind of where you were going to go with your decision there. But Blachowicz controlled Pereira for half of that fight, just over half of that 15-minute fight. For 7 minutes and 54 seconds, he controlled him. And we saw it's not easy to take Alex down, all right? And Ankalaev wasn't able to do it. So is Blachowicz going to go in here and have success with his grappling against the high-level striker in Olberg? That's something you have to take into consideration. And look at the Ankalaev draw. I had him losing that fight, but you still got to give him credit landing those leg kicks. He could throw at you offensively as well. He can hang with Olberg there. But I would say that Olberg is going to get the edge in those types of striking exchanges. And if we do see a finish, I would lean towards Olberg getting the KO. We've seen Olberg KO'd once before in a fight where he was winning and he just got a little overzealous. He was very young back then. It was his UFC debut. He was taking on Kennedy and Chukwu, and he made that mistake. And since then, I mean, we saw how he was way more hesitant in the Fabio Charrière fight. That's a fight that he would have typically got a finish, but he just had a safe pace to that fight. And then now we're seeing him getting that confidence back, and he's just going out there finishing almost everybody that he's been in there with, besides in the last fight against Volkan Ozdemir, which the Ozdemir fight was a major feather in his cap. I'm high on Ozdemir. He's very well-rounded. The strikes were close. If you take a look at the numbers, he just outlanded him 98-96, but two of the judges had that fight 30-27. Olberg was light on his feet. He was landing the more significant strikes, stuffed both of the takedown attempts that Ozdemir threw his way. I think that's important. I think Ozdemir is very comparable to Jan Blachowicz to an extent, and I think that was great cage time for Olberg as he tries to eventually face off with the top of this division. So there's just a lot of signs that are pointing towards Olberg's way for me, specifically the fact that he is the younger, fresher fighter who's more hungry and has more mileage left to give the game. Blachowicz coming off the long layoff, over a year layoff, being 42 years old. I have an issue backing him here. I got Carlos Olberg winning this fight, and I'm more torn on can he possibly get a KO? Because he is a fight finisher. Okay, he will knock you out, right? And his 11 pro victories, 6 of them have come by way of KO, mixed in with the sub there. He's a fight finisher. Blachowicz has been knocked out and sub before, although we've seen him get better with age. It's kind of weird. You think about back in the day when he was getting knocked out by fighters like Thiago Santos, and was also knocked out by someone else early on, and he was subbed twice. At the end of the day, I think Olberg will just be a little bit of a step ahead. Take a look at the numbers too, landing 7.2 strikes per minute. He really pushes the pace with his striking, fighting at a Team City Kickboxing. He's a high-level striker, and he may absorb a little bit more than Blachowicz, but he does have the better ratio. I do see there, and I just think there's a lot of signs pointing towards his way. Give me Carlos Olberg to get a big W here in the co-main event. And you take a look at the line, he is a pretty hefty favorite when you take into consideration the level of a fighter of Blachowicz. Now, proven he is, but it's somewhat understandable with the layoff. Minus 225. I'm not crazy about the value there. If Blachowicz comes into this fight in good shape and rejuvenated off the layoff, we may see this fight play out very competitively. And that type of fight, when you're talking about a plus 180, plus 190 underdog spot in Blachowicz, that is where the value is. And I lean more towards the value being on Jan at this point in time. But give me Olberg to win a decision. I'm going to say he doesn't get that KO and it goes to a decision. In the main event, we got Leon Edwards taking on Sean Brady. We already talked about the implications of this fight for the future of the division. Okay, they carry a lot of weight. The winner of this bout is going to be barking up the tree to be next in line. We'll see. At the very least, they're going to have a number one contenders bout after this one. Okay, I mean, so they're in arm's reach. All right, they may even fight for the belt next. Who knows? Depending on how things shake out. Please excuse the fact that Edwards has this belt strapped around his shoulder. Obviously, he is not the champion after what Belal Muhammad just did to him, which was quite shocking. All right, I mean, the writing was somewhat on the wall. We've seen major growth in the ability of Belal Muhammad, but I mean, that was impressive. He went out there, he was 9 of 13 on his takedown attempts with 12 minutes of control time. He outlanded Edwards 192 to 89. I mean, the pace that Belal pushes is pretty crazy. Even though people want to talk about how he doesn't finish fights, I mean, he's good at what he does. Okay, love him or hate him. And he went out there and he also broke down Sean Brady, right? Sean Brady's lone loss as a pro, he is 17-1. That one loss came by way of Belal Muhammad. So in retrospect, the loss doesn't look as bad, right? At the time, it looked a little worse. I mean, Belal Muhammad is the reigning champ right now. So that loss was what it was. Sean Brady said mentally he just was not there on the night, and he knew it the morning that he woke up. Mentally, he is in a way better spot right now as he comes into this fight on a 2-fight winning streak. And not just a 2-fight winning streak. He's going out there and looking to be the best version that we've ever seen from him. He went out there, dominated Gastelum, got that 3rd-round sub, went out there and dominated Gilbert Burns in a 5-round fight. He outstruck him 274-76. He had 10 minutes and 34 seconds of control time as he was 7 of 17 on his takedown attempts. I mean, Brady is really coming in to this fight with his confidence back behind him. As I mentioned earlier, I got a little bit of some behind the scenes. I know he's got a lot going on in his life right now. I mean, this is probably, without a doubt, this is like the biggest time in his life. I know, not to dive into his personal stuff, but I know he has some big things going on for himself. He knows that he is within arm's reach of fighting for the title. Okay, so his time is now. All right, and I like the fact that he's just 32 years old. All right, he's cruising into his physical prime. He has great grappling. The striking is evolving. It's getting better and better. And you mix this all together, I just think that he has a little bit more gas in the tank right now than a Leon Edwards. Although Edwards is still just 33 years old, I don't know. Something is telling me this fight is going to play out very similar to what we saw when he faced off against Belal. I could see Brady getting takedowns, getting the better of those type of grappling exchanges. Obviously, Edwards has shown a lot of growth there too. Even in the Belal fight, he had a couple takedowns, and sometimes he'll stuff them, but I think that Brady pushes through and still gets the better of those. And if you also want to take a look back at the Brady versus Gilbert Burns fight, okay, he outlanded him significantly. We saw a lot of growth with his striking. You take a look at those numbers. Those weren't just down on the mat. A lot of these strikes were landed at range, okay, at distance. 90% of his strikes were landed at range. So we're seeing that growth from his striking there as well. I mean, Edwards is a very polished kickboxer, but it's not going to just be a straight up kickboxing match. As Brady pressures and threatens to change levels, he could land on the feet as well. And I think that there's a lot of signs pointing towards Sean Brady here. And a lot of it, I don't want to say it's a gut feeling, because it's more than just a gut feeling. But if you guys know what I'm saying, I know there's people out there that are going to say, oh, the value's definitely on Edwards, and Edwards has the recipe to keep this fight standing and be the sharper striker. He has a 2-inch reach advantage. He's the more rangy fighter. Some people may point towards that direction, but if you really take a step back and you just kind of see their most recent performances, it's like Brady, he's got something behind him right now. I'm telling you guys, his engine is roaring, and in a 5-round fight, I just see him pushing the pace throughout it and just having success there. All right. Now, it obviously is a close matchup. I'm not overlooking Leon Edwards completely. If Edwards can create space, he may be able to have a lot of success with his kickboxing, and he's well-rounded. Okay, so this is by no means me sitting on the mic telling you guys that Brady's going to run through Edwards. But at the end of the day, I'm going to trust my gut here, and I'm going to say that Brady digs deep and gets this W and looks to do some huge things in the near future and potentially gets his hand on the gold. We'll see. Kind of mentioned it in the preview, man. So there is the potential that the teller over here could be doing some work with Sean Brady and Pyfer. Okay, there's been some talks behind the scenes, and I hope that does come to fruition. I would love to get some content coming your guys' way, consistently chopping it up on the mic with fighters of that level. I have a lot of respect for Joe Pyfer and Brady, as you guys know. I've been a big Joe Pyfer guy, so hopefully that comes to light and that happens, but we'll see. Even if it doesn't, I got a lot of respect for those guys, and I've been talking to some of their team and whatnot, and right now they're busy and they're grinding to try to make an attempt to bring a championship over to Philly. So they got my support over there. I'm backing Sean Brady here, and realistically, I have him winning this fight regardless. So they got my support. We take a look at the line. He's right around a -160 right now in some of these books. He's as low as a -140, so it's not completely out of range. You could try to argue that the value's in the dog here at +140 in Edwards. I completely would see where you're coming from if you say that. But I'm just going to tell you guys, Sean Brady's coming, man, with the full head of steam, dude. He's a train right now. And Edwards, I think that he has a little bit more mileage on him than his age shows. So I think that Brady just freight trains him. And does he get a sub? Maybe keep an eye on a rear naked choke type of sub, something like that. Maybe he could break Edwards down, but I'll lean towards a decision. I'm going to say that Brady gets his hand raised via decision in Edwards' own country. All right. It's just, even if he has the crowd behind him, with Brady taking his back and just controlling him and solidifying rounds, it's not going to be close enough for him to squeak by with that hometown edge and get his hand raised. I'm going to say Brady does enough to cement the unanimous decision. All right, guys, that's going to close this one out. And don't forget, if you're looking to sign up to a new sportsbook, reach out to me and I'll give you guys an additional gift if you guys are interested. Finished it up. Don't forget, the main card starts at 4 p.m. Eastern, right? So the prelims will be on nice and early. It's a daytime card for us in the States. And just want to say thank you to everyone out there. Please smash that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And as always, with these long videos, I like to hit you guys up with some parting words as we depart. Something that I was just thinking about. I see this very often, and it reminds me of when I was young. For you youngsters out there, some of you guys haven't fully understood the fact that time will heal everything. All right. It basically will heal everything to an extent. I mean, there's some things that could happen that could stay with you, but they won't be as hurtful, and they won't wear on you as much as when you're going through it at that current time. So the point I'm making is, whether it's breaking up with the girl, if you're a youngster, you have your first harsh breakup, losing a loved one, whatever puts you into a deep, dark state, you guys have to understand. And I want you guys to know this, that haven't really been through these types of battles. You got to understand and trust me when I tell you guys that it will get way better with time. You'll be sitting back thinking about something like that, something that was horrific that took place a year or 2 years ago, or something that you may even think that was horrific, right? Something that just made you sad. You look at it in 2-3 years, if you give it some time, you'll be laughing about it. And in some cases, like a breakup, a girl. And the reason why I bring that up, man, is because some of you guys, we see it, man. You see it. Some people, they let that, and I know it. I felt it, and I've done certain things, man. You talk about, you got to be careful, man, with the ladies. I'll tell you that much, man. It can make people do things that they would have never done otherwise. You think that, like, the world's falling apart. You could be quick to do something violent over a girl, something crazy. You kind of have that what's the word I'm looking for, man? Kind of like an animal instinct take over, and you'll do things that you shouldn't, and you'll do things that can ruin the future of your life. So you need to put your head on your shoulders. You need to realize, trust me when I tell you guys, that feeling you're feeling, it's not going to stick with you. And you're going to completely forget about that girl or other situations like that. Now, even losing a loved one, man, it will get better, and you'll come to acceptance for what God had planned. And you got to stick to your script, stay positive, and I'll leave you guys with that. I can go more and more on that note. A lot, I just make sure you don't make bad decisions based on a fact of you being in a state where you feel like you're helpless and just everything's falling apart. Because what you don't realize is that that's not going to last. It's not. I'm telling you right now, it's not. So you're going to do something in that state, and then you're going to be kicking yourself a little bit down the line if you do something stupid. So put your head on your shoulders. Always nothing but love and respect to all you guys out there. And I appreciate you guys for tailing me on my journey towards the top of this MMA game. All right, guys. Signing out. Teller.
The teller.